Hey there, pirates! Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. Today we will talk about Akainu's power, someone who has long wanted to destroy Monkey D. Luffy. Not only that, but someone who could easily become the Pirate King if he left the Marines, according to Oda himself. We will discuss this and much more in today's video, and I already count on your support to leave a like. Your like is very important and helps the channel. I also count on you to subscribe if you're new here. You are super welcome to our crew. Sakazuki, or rather Akainu, is visibly one of the most powerful people in the world of One Piece. But did you know that the Fleet Admiral, according to Oda, could easily become the Pirate King? As we know, Luffy's dream is to go to Laugh Tale, or rather Laftel, and basically find Roger's legacy there, become the Pirate King, and find the One Piece. However, in an interview around 2014, Oda, when asked about Akainu, made a shocking revelation about the current leader of the Marines. Or rather, that if Akainu were not a great Marine but a pirate, he would quickly become the greatest of pirates. This is because Oda said the following, that if Akainu were the protagonist of One Piece, he would simply find the One Piece in just 1 year. But what does this mean? What does Oda, the creator of One Piece, consider about Sakazuki being unstoppable? Easily more powerful than the Yonkos? Is Luffy still infinitely far from surpassing Akainu? Well, before we talk about the Fleet Admiral's powers and the current powers of the Mugiwara, we need to analyze Oda's statement. And basically, first of all, what did the author mean by this statement? After all, we have two interpretations. The first is that Oda meant that in the first year of publishing the manga, with Akainu being a pirate, having the power he possesses, and being the protagonist of the series, he would simply cross the East Blue, enter the Grand Line, travel through the New World, and reach Laftel, finding Goldie Roger's treasure in just 1 year. In other words, surpassing all other pirates who risked their lives on the seas. And well, this was the interpretation most people had about Oda's message, that he would quickly reach the One Piece. But there is another interpretation of the same phrase, which seems to be what the author really wanted to convey. When talking about Akainu, with his current power, starting an adventure as a pirate and finding the One Piece in just 1 year, he didn't mean that in 1 year of manga publication, but rather that he would easily pass through the adventures Oda had created for his protagonists. Because as we know, at the beginning of his journey as a pirate, Luffy was extremely inexperienced, and for this reason, he went through many difficulties when meeting enemies who crossed his path, which caused his journey to be greatly delayed. However, even with all of this, and even with the time skip where Luffy trained, he has only just begun his journey as the captain of a pirate crew just 2 years ago. In other words, for Akainu, who was already frighteningly powerful, he wouldn't need to train. He would also easily defeat Luffy's enemies. Buggy, Kuro, Don Krieg, Arlong, Crocodile, Enel, and most of the adversaries Luffy faced and struggled against could be easily defeated by Akainu, who was already extremely powerful, to the point of not even fearing facing Edward Newgate. So, with all this, we understand that as the protagonist of One Piece, Akainu would easily go through everything that Luffy went through. And considering that, up until now, with all the difficulties the Straw Hat has faced, he hasn't even reached 3 years of adventure, then Akainu going through all this and more in 1 year wouldn't be difficult. In short, if we changed Oda's phrase to say, if Luffy had Akainu's power level as Fleet Admiral when he started his journey, he would go through everything he has experienced quickly and evolve even more on his journey. But going back, in summary, this statement doesn't mean that if Akainu crossed paths with Newgate, Kaido, Lin Lin, or other major adversaries, he would easily win. In fact, it just means that with his power and experience, he would fare better in those situations, or something along those lines. So, as is obvious, Akainu is not invincible. I actually have to admit that I wish Sengoku hadn't held Garp back and let him melt a certain volcano at Marineford. However, now that we've discussed Oda's statement and what he possibly meant, let's talk about Luffy and the Fleet Admiral. As we know, Akainu is a frightening figure. This is because, since his time as a vice admiral, he has already proven to be unstoppable, like when he destroyed Ohara's evacuation ship during the Buster Call, simply because perhaps one scholar might have escaped. And as we've seen, all the admirals have knowledge of haki, but Akainu has only been shown using Busashoku haki, and he was impressed when he saw that Luffy possesses the Conqueror's haki, and now, as we know, after the time skip, Luffy greatly improved his haki by learning how to control it. But that obviously doesn't mean Luffy is as powerful as someone just because he has Conqueror's haki. After all, we saw how Aokiji, even without possessing or showing signs of having Conqueror's haki, was strong enough to scare off Doflamingo, as we saw when he saved Smoker. So having Conqueror's haki doesn't necessarily make someone stronger than everyone else. However, at the same time, we now see that Luffy possesses the power of advanced Conqueror's haki. At least he was able to use it during his fight with Kaido. And that could be his advantage in a future battle against Sakazuki, especially once the Straw Hat becomes more experienced. After all, we know Akainu has the power of a Logia-type devil fruit, and only those who can use Busoshoku haki, armament haki, can actually hit him. That alone makes him practically invincible to most pirates outside the New World. He's heavily reliant on the powers of his devil fruit, but what about the power of the Sun God? Let's break it down. With the awakening of the Hito no Mi, Luffy, through the power of Nika, the Sun God's fruit, gains a significant boost in strength, endurance, and flexibility, along with unique abilities that allow him to distort reality in a comical and surprising way. This power transforms the battlefield around him, giving Luffy the potential to overcome the abilities of a powerful opponent like Akainu. Akainu, on the other hand, is one of the strongest marines and has the power of the Magu no Mi, the magma fruit, which is incredibly destructive and can even harm other Logia users, as we saw when he defeated Ace. This fruit is insanely powerful in direct combat and naturally counters fire-based powers. Luffy would still face a tough challenge due to Akainu's brutal and relentless nature. But with the power of Nika, he can push past physical limits and adapt to direct lava attacks, nullifying part of the magma's devastating impact. In the end, while Luffy would have a better chance of beating Akainu with this ability, the victory would still depend heavily on the situation, strategy, and endurance of both. And we know their confrontation is about more than just strength, considering their history and the emotional intensity behind a battle between them. Even so, despite all of this, it's not yet time to expect a rematch between Luffy and Akainu, where the pirate can finally settle that score. After all, even though the Straw Hat Boy can use this power, he still lacks experience. At the same time, we know that a confrontation between Luffy and the Marines could happen, especially now that Garp has been captured by Teach. A gathering of all major powers could take place because of the news surrounding that event. And this time, with all of Luffy's evolution and the growth of his crew who weren't with him during the Marineford battle, they could all go together to rescue Garp, which might put Luffy face to face with Akainu, who has already said that the Straw Hat is one of his biggest targets. But drop your thoughts below. What do you think about Luffy's evolution and Oda's statement about Fleet Admiral Sakazuki? That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.